Dear Sviatlana, I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate the good news that we got this morning on the Nobel Peace Prize, awarded to human rights and human dignity defenders in Belarus, in Ukraine, and in Russia, than to do it with you, to celebrate it with you, because this is also who you are. So with your presence here, and I guess with the applause that we just shared with you, we want to celebrate this incredible courage, this determination, which is a tough one, and we know that, which is the fight for, again, human rights and human dignity. Today is the 7th of October. On the 7th of October, another human rights defender, Arancha González, was assassinated. And I think this award also bears the name of Arancha González and the thousands of men and women that today are either dead or imprisoned or in exile because they happen to think differently, because they happen to believe in freedoms, individual or collective. That is what makes democracies. You are the leader of the Belarus democratic movement. You ran for the elections in 2020. We've been following you. I've been following you for a while. I know that you ran because your husband was imprisoned. You took the torch together with some of your colleagues and you decided to run. Of course, unsurprising, Lukashenko declared victory and you went into exile. But this has not stopped you from fighting for what you believe and for the beliefs of millions of Belarusian men and women at home or in exile. So, Sviatlana, we want to hear your message. The students want to share this moving moment with you. We'll hear your message, and then if you agree, after your words, we will give them the floor to put the questions to you. Is that okay? Good. Sviatlana, the floor is yours.
Dear Arancha, dear students of Science Po and dear friends, I'm happy to be back. I remember I was very impressed by the students of this great establishment. It has produced so many great leaders for France and the world. And of course, I'm happy to see you, dear Arancha. Our relationship goes back to your time as Foreign Minister of Spain. Now you are Dean of the International Affairs School and the first woman to hold this position. Congratulations. And it's a very important moment of our history. As you know, just 1 hour ago, the Nobel Committee has awarded the most important award in the world to Ales Bialiatsky, our friend and honorary citizen of the city of Paris. He is a freedom fighter and the symbol of the global fight for human rights, and I'm actually so proud of him. As you know, Ales Bialiatsky in prison now, but his work continues to live. Same as the work of Maria Kolesnikova. Tatiana Homich, your sister, is studying here, and I'm happy to see her in audience, though I don't. Oh, some of you might not know this, but Masha was one of my trusted persons and comrade during the presidential campaign. Even though, even now, when I say presidential campaign, I feel like a little bit awkward. As just 2 years ago, I was an ordinary housewife and mother of two wonderful children. Believe it or not, I had absolutely no interest in politics. But then my husband, Sergei Tikhanovsky, stood up against Lukashenko and was locked up for that. And I ran for him. And people voted for me, voted for changes, voted for democracy. You know, when I was just walking through these corridors today, I could almost hear the echoes of all conversations between great minds. Here, the best and the brightest of your country have sharpened their minds, and you attract the best minds from all over the world, such as Professor Guriev, whom I had wonderful conversation yesterday during the Georgetown Award ceremony. And using this opportunity, Sergei, thank you for your recently published study on the political economy of the Belarusian crisis. Now, I would like you to imagine the place where the best minds of my country are currently gathered. The politicians, the intellectuals, the human rights defenders, the journalists. And it's not a university like this. This place is prison. It doesn't have beautiful rooms like this. It has dark, cold basement cells. Because speaking the truth has become dangerous in Belarus. So if you go to my country today and you want to meet the minds that will shape our tomorrow, you have to visit them in prison. But of course you will not be allowed to see them. Heroes such as Ales Bialiatsky, now Nobel Prize winner. Our human rights defender Marfa Rabkova, who was sentenced to 15 years in prison last month, the longest sentence for any female political prisoner. Our journalist Andrei Alexandrov, who just yesterday got 14 years, as he called it, high treason. This is an award for his excellent journalism. And of course, I must mention my husband, Sergei. He has now been in isolation cell for more than 45 days. He was transferred there on his birthday. And I'm here to speak for him, for all those who are sacrificed their freedom to continue our fight. I'm here to give them a voice. At the moment, more than 1,350 political prisoners are behind bars. The number keeps growing all the time. More than 50,000 people in Belarus have been detained at some point. Many have been tortured. These detentions are meant to spread fear. You never know when the police will come knocking on your door. There is a complete absence of justice in our justice system. You can be accused of anything at any point of time. And the machine of repression is acting with absolute impunity. Not a single official has been charged, despite thousands of documented cases of torture, despite beatings and deaths in detention. No one has been held accountable. The law enforcement system has no resources to protect citizens from crimes because it is too busy committing them. The innocent are locked up by the guilty. Time and again we hear about possible amnesties. We can't let political prisoners be used as bargaining chips. Some are released only to be arrested next day. Some get their sentences shortened by a few weeks, while others are faced with new charges. We must demand that all are released and that all repressions stop. They must be free. Today, at this very special place, I also want to talk about the rules. As a human being, we know that our actions have consequences. As a nation, we are bound by rules in a community of nations. Without rules, life becomes impossible. There is no longer any predictability because anything can happen. We are no longer able to trust each other, and without basic trust, society can't function. The international community can't function. So we need basic respect for the rules that bind us together as human and as nations. In Belarus, we are seeing what happens when rules no longer apply. Laws can be bent at the will of the dictator. Elections are faked. Opponents are locked away or moderate. You can be detained for a like or comment you made on social media, for the color of your socks, for doing your job too well. You just instinctively try to avoid catching too much attention. In the international society of nations, the rules-based world order of the last 30 years is being challenged because dictators don't play by the rules. When you can lie to and repress your own citizens, there is only a short step to lying to the whole world. In the last week, we have seen the illegal Russian annexation of occupied parts of Ukraine. It's an attempt to break our rule-based world order. When there are no rules, anything can happen. It makes us feel insecure as humans. It makes the world feel insecure. This is precisely what autocrats like Lukashenko are trying to accomplish. They are trying to paralyze Belarusians with fear so we will not act. They are trying to paralyze the world community. But you know what? It won't work, because we are stronger than that. You know, during the last 2 days, I met here in Paris with the presidents of Senate and National Assembly, Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. And I'm thankful to France for your unwavering support. It means that we can get closer to freeing our loved ones tomorrow. I wish my husband Sergei could be here. One day I will tell him about this wonderful place. I will tell him about the warm welcome that I received and how the people of France stood for Belarusians. This is a very beautiful university, but you know, the building doesn't matter. You matter. You are the leaders of tomorrow. You will create a better world for future generations. A world based on rules, trust, and respect. Wars must be banished to the past. Empires must be banished to the past. And freedom must win. In Belarus, our future leaders are waiting in prison. The building of prison is not beautiful, but inside there are beautiful minds with warm hearts and inspiring dreams. Just imagine the country that they will build. Just imagine the world that you will build together with them. In my speech here 1 year ago, I gave one piece of advice based on my personal experience. Do things you love and out of love, out of true conviction and dedication. And it still applies. Go forward regardless of your fear or what others might say. Often we tend to underestimate our inner strength and ability to learn new things and adapt. And most importantly, you are not alone. Together we can change the world. Together we will defeat the tyranny. As after events in Belarus in 2020 and Ukraine in February 2022. The world now understands that defense of freedom is not a local issue. That true democracies must stand together to protect each other. Fates of Belarus and Ukraine are intertwined, and the fates of Belarus and Europe too. I won't stop repeating. A threat to democracy in one country is a threat to the whole world. Without victory in Ukraine, A free Belarus is not impossible. And without free Belarus, there can be no peace in Europe. So let us stand together for freedom, peace and justice, for Ukraine and for Belarus. Merci beaucoup.
So students, this is up to you now. There is 2 mics, one on each side. You queue and you put your questions to Sviatlana. I want to pick on what you just said, Sviatlana. Just yesterday, 44 European countries got together in Prague. 2 European countries were missing, Belarus and Russia. And just like you, I do hope that very soon we will be able to see the whole of Europe reunited, keeping our fingers crossed. We are going to start with the gentleman over there. You tell us who you are and you put your question to Sviatlana.
So I'm Mark Vincent. I'm a student here at Sciences Po, and I'm very inspired by your fight for freedom. I'm half Romanian, and I know what dictatorship means for my parents, and I think you're a role model to all of us, and we're very inspired by you. I want to ask you whether you think, if we look at the autocratic inventions that Russia is carrying out in countries like Kazakhstan or Ukraine right now, whether you think that it is possible to have a non-aligned Belarus that is free. Because the freedom movement that took place in Belarus was a rather non-aligned one. You were not necessarily asking for NATO membership or even EU membership, but maybe these things might be looking less realistic after everything that happened in the last years. How would you see that? And do you think that a new Belarusian freedom movement would have to ask for more alignment with the West, maybe?
Can you please ask the concrete question and not so fast?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just asking, do you think that if Belarus wants to be democratic, do you think it has to be aligned with maybe NATO or the EU? Or do you think it's possible to have a neutral Belarus that is not under threat by Putin?
Yeah, I got it. Look, we Belarusians realize ourselves as part of European family of countries. We dedicated to the same democratic values. We want to change our country for better. But now I don't think it's time to speak about alliances, to speak about NATO participation in the European Union and so on, because first of all, we haven't achieved the goals we have in front of us, and huge reforms should be taken in Belarus to achieve the standards that are necessary to participate in democratic organizations. But what we need now is to see European perspectives. That's why I'm asking our political partners, show that that Belarusians are welcomed. Invite Belarusians to study in the universities, to work in international media, to to gain the experience we have been lacked for many, many years. And in the future, of course, Belarusian people will have chance to choose how they want to develop, in what coalition. Maybe in a couple of years, there will be other organizations or coalitions of countries, as it was yesterday in Prague. So who knows, now our task now is to release our people from jails and hold new elections and start this democratic way of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do have Belarusian students in Sciences Po, and very proudly, the gentleman over there.
Dear Sviatlana, thank you very much for the conference. My question would be the following one. What's the current state of mobilization against the regime, and what is the capacity of mobilization against the Belarus regime? Thank you.
For 2 years, Belarusian people are fighting against the regime. And yes, our fight now went undergroundly because it's almost impossible, you know, to go for rallies or to be vocal about your anti-regime or anti-opposition. Now it's very important, I would say, and difficult moment in our history when we have to fight not only against regime but also for Ukraine, because we understand the connection of the fates of both our countries. And of course, I would like to see people very actively mobilized at this very moment, but we have to keep people safe for them to be active in the next window of opportunity in our country. When Ukraine wins, it means that Kremlin will be weaker and hence Lukashenko will be weaker. And it will be the moment we'll have to feel, we'll have to catch, you know, to try once again to get rid of the regime. So I'm sure that there are people in Belarus and those who are in exile, they still have energy, they still have strength to continue this fight, and we need to mobilize all of them, not now, but in that particular moment that will appear, I hope, in the nearest future. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Hi, my name is Alex Pumbo. I'm American, Colombian, and Swiss on exchange from the University of Geneva. First of all, спасибо большое за ваше время сегодня. I have two questions. They're both related to the current war in Ukraine. And the first one is that there were many whispers, especially at the beginning of the conflict, about a potential involvement of Belarus in the conflict. And I want to ask you, how likely do you see that that actually happens, especially with, for example, mobilization of Belarusian troops into the conflict in Ukraine? And secondly, I wanted to ask also about your position as opposition and your activities. Has, for example, now the war in Ukraine changed how you go about your activities? Has there been a shift? And what are your current activities? Thank you very much.
As for our Belarusian army, you know, it was, when the war has started, it was like big danger that Belarusian troops could join Russian army invading Kiev. We also were like worrying about this question, and since the very first day of the war, we started campaign trying to persuade our people, our soldiers, not to participate. Mothers of the soldiers called to officers, you know, saying we don't want our sons or husbands to go to the war. And step by step, we also got inside information from the army, and we realized that there is no anti-Ukrainian moods among our soldiers. They don't want to go and fight with Ukrainians, with our neighboring countries. We always had wonderful relationship, and go and die for, you know, for ambitions of two usurpers. And we have heard, I'm not sure if it's true, that such order to invade Ukraine was given by Lukashenko's regime. We actually can't check this, but it wasn't fulfilled, or maybe wasn't delivered by some generals, you know, to the army, because they knew the situation inside Belarus, or inside the Belarusian army. So now when there is again a threat that our country can be used by Russian troops to start invasion from northern border of Ukraine, this question is being asked again: is your army going to participate? I'm almost 100% sure that no way. And actually, if, for example, Lukashenko dares to call people for mobilization in Belarus, it will be his political suicide. Because even those who are supporting, maybe supporting Lukashenko politically because they feel comfortable in this regime, they are close to this regime, they don't support the war. They understand that Lukashenko's policy, Lukashenko's alliance with Kremlin isolate Belarus from democratic countries, and they want our country to develop And actually, even those who are in nomenclatura, in elites, in law enforcement, they say that Lukashenko actually is selling our independence, is selling our sovereignty just to keep in power. And most of people, even around Lukashenko, don't want to be appendix of Russia. We want our sovereign, independent country. So maybe at one particular moment, all those people will also play their role in changes in Belarus. So I wouldn't be afraid that Belarusian troops would join Russian army. And the second question?
The second question is if your activities have changed because of the war in Ukraine, and also what your current activities are.
Yeah, actually, when the war has started, Belarusians, of course, understood that we have somehow helped Ukrainians, because just imagine, for a year and a half, there was huge wave of repressions in our country. People, of course, afraid, new detentions happening every day. And in this atmosphere, dreadful atmosphere of tyranny and terror, people, it was necessary for people to show their anti-war position. Suddenly, nobody expected that the first time since 2020, a huge rally took place in Belarusian cities. Of course, people have been detained, and they knew this, and new partisans appeared. Partisans maybe even didn't participate in rallies 2020, but now they realized that we need to support, to help Ukraine somehow, and they disrupted railways, made acts of sabotage on railways to stop Russian equipment going through our country to Ukraine. Some of them now have been coached and face death penalty, actually. Ordinary people, Lukashenko thought that he ruined all the civil society, you know, people frightened all of them. They made pictures of Russian equipment, Russian troops, Russian tanks going through our country, and sent this information to Ukraine for them, you know, to inform about movement. Also, hundreds of Belarusian military volunteers now fighting shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainians, and they actually on their counter-offensive at the moment. So our task now is not only fight with the regime, to weaken the regime, to create multiple points of pressure on the regime, but also to protect Ukraine as much as we can. Of course, we are, as democratic movement, as democratic society, we don't have weapon. We don't have opportunity to help in huge millions of euros as powerful countries do. But in our strength to support Ukraine on political level, in the strength of our people to help Ukrainians, refugees in Poland or Lithuania, because we know what it means, you know, to grab child, grab bag and flee the country. We actually feel this pain. In our strength to make fundraising programs to provide Ukrainian and Belarusian wearers with food, with cars, with equipment. So this is what we can do, and we are doing this. Of course, now what has changed in our requests to the Western countries is that our independence is under threat, and we need security guarantees from powerful countries. And the second one is that all Russian troops have been withdrawn from Belarusian territory as well, not only from Ukrainian, but also from Belarus. Because while they are there, it will be constant threat to our neighboring countries. Thank you. And of course, counter-propaganda. Counter-propaganda, regime's propaganda, because in Belarus, state television, they reiterate Russian narrative about war, about denazification and all that stuff. And moreover, there is one more detail that on state TV, they say that it's Lukashenko who is saving our country. This is Lukashenko, guarantor of the peace in Belarus. It's Poland, Lithuania wants to grab Belarusian cities. You know, he's looking for external enemies, and they present him as the person who is saving our nation. But Belarusian people already experienced, they know where the truth is, they know how to get alternative sources of information, but still, we have to counter this. They're spending millions and millions, for advertising of their messages, and we have to counter this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sviatlana. The lady over there.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Tikhanovskaya. My name is Pauline, and I'm a student at Sciences Po and La Sorbonne in first year. My question is, how can you explain that more women across the world decided to stand up and lead more and more political and social action? What has changed?
Why is it that more and more women are standing up?
I'm sure that women always were strong. We sometimes forget or underestimate the strength and power of women. But when women stand in front of difficulties, stand in front of challenges, stand in front of choice, they discover how strong they are. And they understand that the power doesn't belong to men. Power belongs to everybody who has strength, who has internal power to fight, to change the world, and more women are becoming self-confident. That's why more and more women leaders appearing, and women actually are more empathetic, I would say, and for sure the world would be better if there are more women in the power, because we know the price of human life, we know the price of future of our children, we take care of this. I doubt, maybe there were examples in history, I'm not so very experienced, but I doubt that women can start the war. Women may protect a nation, her country, but will not be initiator of the war. Thank you.
Thank you.
So a vote of self-confidence. Ladies in the room, that's the message. Lady over there.
Дякую великий, Sviatlana. My name is Tatiana, and I first met you at a rally on the 1st of August 2020 in my hometown, Grodno, in western Belarus. Next, I met you in Riga, where I live now, in November 2020. And now here in Sciences Po, where I am in part because of you also, in a political science university, because you inspired me to put my thoughts back to Belarus. And I'm one of those kids who are here also because of the regime, because all my life I knew that there is no future for me in Belarus and I have to leave. I have to go away. But when I went away, I realized that it's in Belarus where my heart belongs, what my heart hurts for. And now my question is really, well, I will explain the context a bit later of my question, but the question is, if again you were in that moment when you decided to run for the presidency, when you decided to become a politician, make this transition, would you do that again? And what advice would you give to yourself? Because the concept of my question is that there are smart kids, my friends, who are right now, who left Belarus, who are in exile, and they are thinking, is it worth it to sacrifice all the incredible prospects of the money they can earn in Europe being so smart to go and fight for Belarus? What would you say to that?
Yeah, actually the heart belonging to Belarus. When I was a student, I also had opportunity to stay in Ireland. It was wonderful, wonderful country, wonderful perspectives, but I actually couldn't do this because, I couldn't imagine myself anywhere only in Belarus. And I actually understand you. this is, of course, young people who also had to flee Belarus because of repression. So the students who think that they can have wonderful life in foreign countries, have wonderful education. I'm sure that they think that their place in Belarus, because it's much more serious and higher mission, to develop your country. You can be a wonderful specialist in your small world, like you are developing yourself. It's wonderful. But when your knowledges help the whole country, help the whole nation, so it means that you are fulfilling your mission. So I advise to people who fled Belarus because of repressions or not, to study, to get knowledges, to see how democratic world is organized, how people respect each other, how people respect the law, and bring these knowledges back to Belarus, because sooner or later Belarus will be free, and we will need huge amount of specialists who know how to organize normal life, normal institutions. Because for 27 years, I'm sure that those who are working there now forgot how to serve to people, but not to one master or their own interest. That's why now we are asking the universities in different countries, please accept as many Belarusian students as possible, because now you are studying them for them to be useful to their country in the future. Also, we are asking parliaments and government and city halls to accept Belarusians for shadowing, how it's called is for shadowing, just to see all this, how the structures work, from inside, because they have to implement knowledges and experience in future institutions in Belarus. So thank you that you left your heart in our motherland, and for sure we'll see you in the future wonderful, free and democratic Belarus.
Thank you, and see you again.
Thank you.
The lady over there, please.
Hello, and thank you very much for your presence and your words. I am a Guatemalan student in journalism and human rights. And my question is, you have shown your strength through your decisions and your actions, and mentioned all the strength of the people that are fighting for a democratic Belarus. Where does that strength come from, in your opinion? Thank you.
Where do you get your strength from?
I would say it's very difficult for more than 2 years, day after day, to fight. Because every day is full of pain for those who are in prisons, for those who can be detained in Belarus, for those who are being tortured in jails, and you know about this. And this every day of my life now is full of fear, of course, for those who are suffering in jails, for those who are being tortured in jails, for those who can be kidnapped in Belarus at any moment. And you understand that this new day, you have to do everything possible to close the moment of release of all those people. But do you think I never wanted to give up, to say, look, I can't do this anymore, I'm so exhausted, I'm so tired, just let anybody else do this. But you actually can't do this, because Belarusians gave you mandate. Belarusian people believe in you, and every day I actually feel that I'm not alone. That if I'm exhausted, there will be always people around me who support me, who take my shoulder and say, I'm with you, who help me to lift, подняться, to lift, and just energize a little bit more me every day. So I take my strength from anger to this regime, for that regime dares to split families, regime dares to sentence people to years and years in prisons just for they being vocal and for being brave. And you know, some people, women actually, who already have been released from jails because they served 2 years, the full term, and they are telling me what they experienced in prisons, what they went through, moral, physical humiliation. And after such conversations, your strength are doubling, because the day for you and day for those who are in prisons is absolutely 2 different days. Your day is full of events, you know, you have conversations, talking to people, and those people are alone. And they are going through, you know, such sufferings you can't even imagine. For example, my husband, he's for more than 40 days already in punishment cell. And it's the cell where you don't have bed, you can't lay or sit during the day. The bed is only available during the night, and it's not actually a bed, it's planks, bare metal planks without mattress, without blanket or pillow. The temperature inside cell and outside is the same, is extremely cold. Person is not given warm clothes and has to wake up several times during the night to warm up and to sleep a little bit. People are deprived of normal food, normal, fresh air, and it's every day. No books, no newspapers. You just one-to-one with your thoughts. You start talking to spiders in your cell. This is the reality, and so this anger, this pain, and this fear gives you energy, to move forward. Of course, it's difficult. I don't say that it's so easy, but it's difficult for me. It's difficult for other millions of Belarusians who are really hostages of this regime. And you can't even compare how difficult the situation for you with those who are behind the bars. So, you realize that you are not fighting for yourself, you are fighting for them. And just you can't give up. Get up and go and walk. Thank you.
Oh, that was strong. Gentleman over there.
Thank you. Добрый день. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Cyril, and it is a true privilege to have a person like you today with us. My question is that, of course, undoubtedly, it is needless to say that the movement that you created with other opposition leaders in Belarus is unprecedented in the country's history since 1991, since the country's independence, of course. Hundreds of thousands of people were in the streets of cities like Minsk to demand a regime change, and people were in the streets for weeks, even for months. However, objectively, the change still to this day did not happen. It's been more than 2 years, and I lived in Ukraine for 12 years, a country that I consider to be my home, and the youth there and population considers it to be an unachieved movement. And when it comes to my home country, the country where I was born, Russia, a lot of students, a lot of the youth that is in opposition to the regime believes that it is an example of what Russia may become after a potential start of revolt or protest in the country. This is something that they fear about. And therefore, my 2 questions are, why do you think that Belarus is in this situation today and still did not achieve the goals that it had in August 2020, whereas in a country like Ukraine, Ukrainians achieved it? And finally, of course, it is a very broad question, but when and how do you believe change will happen in Belarus? Дякую, живи Білорусь.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
First of all, I have to explain to the students that the context in Ukraine and in Belarus was always different. You lived in the country where presidents changed each other. You didn't have dictatorship in your country. You didn't know what it is when there are hundreds of political prisoners, when every uprising ends with murders, with disappearing of people, with the growing number of political prisoners. You don't know what it is to live under dictatorship. You have heard about this. You saw Belarus, but you saw Belarus only as clean streets, you know, full shops, and actually Ukrainians, I don't want to blame anybody, but for many Ukrainians, Lukashenko was idol, was wonderful president, because you didn't live in Belarus, you didn't experience, you know, all those, you know, events we experienced. I know that many Ukrainians in 2020 told us that you have to go and fight not only with flowers and balloons. Your peaceful revolution, what is it about? You know, like, look at us, we had Maidan, and of course we understand you, but you don't understand the situation we were in. We were absolutely sure, as only some violence appeared from the side of protesters, there would be immediately tanks, there were immediately OMON, and thousands of military forces who would just kill all of those who are in on the streets. In Kiev, it was a little bit differently, because your law enforcement officers, your OMON, they knew that there could be change of power because there were candidates, you know, there were different views in parliament, and, you know, the situation was absolutely different. So you went va-bank and you won at that moment. But I'm sure that if the same happened in Belarus, just people would be killed, all of them, without any doubt. And Belarusian nation is a little bit different from Ukraine nation, though we have absolutely like similar language. We understand each other without any interpretation, but we always were more patient, more peaceful nation. Maybe not so like brave, you know, as Ukrainians. So it was our path, peaceful revolution. Belarusian people sure that peaceful revolution bring more sustainable changes. Of course, at that moment, we underestimated the cruelty of the regime. We thought that if we are peaceful, there will be no such, such tyranny or terror from the side of the regime. So maybe it was mistake, I don't know, but I'm sure that we didn't have huge amount of people who would like changes be brought to our country through violence, actually. Nobody now can answer, was it right or was it not that we didn't use more active actions during 2020, but people, they were not preparing for uprising. It was like, it went from the heart. You know, people didn't know how to even use violence, you know. But as for bravery of Belarusian people, you know, a person who in 2020 in Belarus took off his shoes to stand on the bench and, you know, say something, he was beaten by OMON, he was in coma for several weeks, he had program of rehabilitation in Czech Republic, and now you know where he is. He's in Ukraine, fighting in Belarusian battalion. So if people felt in 2020, felt that it's a moment for decisive actions, maybe they would act like this. But now this person is brave enough to be on the battlefield in Ukraine. So I don't know how the history will turn and what role our volunteers will play in future Belarus, because of course I hear a lot of words of who are voting for radicalization of our movement, and we don't know, maybe one day they will use their skills, capacities, to put their input into our fight. But actually, I'm woman. Look, I really stick to the idea of peaceful changes, of peaceful revolution, but I can't deny that everything can change, for the side you described. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lady over there, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Marina and I'm Ukrainian. So I want to begin from two simple words. Thank you. Thank you for your real action. Thank you for your position and thank you for your support. And now I'm passing to my question. You are the leader of the democratic opposition of Belarus, and it's quite obvious that the democratic opposition really exists in Belarus. I mean, people are really fighting for their rights. People went out on the streets, as you just said. They were confronted to the Oman, etc., etc. And my question is really simple. Do you believe that the same democratic opposition exists in Russia? Because, I mean, it's quite obvious that Russia will lose, that Putin's imperialistic regime will fall, and then what? How will change the relationships between Russia and Belarus? Because now, because of Lukashenko regime, Belarus in huge dependence of Russia, of Putin's regime. Thank you. Живе Беларусь.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
First of all, I think that regime in Belarus will collapse earlier than regime in Russia, because actually our population is united against regime, against the war. We are not dispersed. Our opinion is not dispersed the same as in Russia. I'm not sure. Look, I'm communicating with many experts, political experts, military experts about the future of Russia, how changes will happen there. Because in our case, we have strategy. We can more or less visualize how the changes will happen. We are preparing, some plans about this. But as for Russia, nobody can answer this question now. Because today in the morning, some politician asked me, do you think that maybe it could be a coup in Kremlin? And actually, I don't know, are there people who will dare do this? Are there people around Putin who wants these changes? Of course, after defeat of Russian army, the war, of course, is still going on, but at least morally, Russian army is defeated. And Kremlin lost the image of world leader who is has the second bravest and biggest army in the world. Some people say that in the future there will be no Russia, will be many separate independent countries, but how it will happen? Actually, I really can't answer the question. Maybe you are, as future politicians, also trying to guess, trying to discuss how collapses of such regimes could happen. Maybe you bet, I don't know. But for sure, I think that government is government, but as for people, I think that Russian people will have to recover their trust to them for many, many years after the war, because we see how, of course, there are voices, there are some opposition movements who are against the war, who are supporting Ukrainian refugees, who are supporting the Ukrainian army, but we still, it's so painful to see that most of Russians are still for the war. They are intoxicated, I would say, with these imperialistic ambitions that they heard from government for many, many years. And they even don't want to ask critical questions to themselves. What this war gives personally for me? Do I really need deaths of so many children, women, people in Ukraine? What for? But they have, toilet on out of the house. They don't have toilet inside, but we are imperial. We are like we are a huge country, and it's not normal. It's because for many, many years people in Russia and I would say in Belarus in less extent, but still, people live in their small families, in their shells, and they don't want to think about more global and important things. People, for many years, look, in Soviet Union, people have been surviving many, many years. They didn't want to think about politics. They thought about what to eat, how to feed your children today. And that's why it just became a habit, not to, sometimes it's easier to be slaves than to uprise and, to show that I'm a human, not a slave. So, of course, it will be up to Ukrainians and Belarusians how to treat, Russia in future. But now we have what we have. We see genocide, we see murders, we see ruining of cities, cultures, and nations. And response should be correspondive. Can I say so? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me also recall that the Nobel Peace Prize has also been awarded to Memorial, a Russian organization that has just been illegalized precisely for defending the same values. I want to bring them also to this conversation because they also are risking their lives for defending the same values that we care about. We're going to take a last question because we're running out of time. Apologies for that.
Hi, thank you for the last question. My name is Maria, I'm from Peru, and I'm a former student of your colleague Karim Peterson. And I wanted to know I have two questions actually. What has been the role of Denmark in this fight for democracy, and now what is the role of Lithuania? And a more personal question is, how are you finding it to balance your life as a wife and a mother, and how are you explaining it to your kids, this fight that you're doing, and why sometimes you might not be present? Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. You asked about Poland and Lithuania?
No, Denmark.
Denmark and?
Lithuania.
Lithuania. Look, I will be grateful to Lithuania for the very last days of my life, because not only me, but thousands of other Belarusian people found safe haven in this wonderful country. Lithuania is rather small, but they're so brave. They really show example how other powerful countries should behave. They are really they are against even China. They are protecting Taiwan people. Yeah, they welcomed a lot of Belarusians and Ukrainians, to protect them. It's evident that they stand for the values, for democratic values. It's more important for them than economic benefits. Thank you. Denmark was one of the countries that launched accountability platform for gathering crimes that have been committed by Lukashenko's regime. It's very important it's very important to collect, to collect all this material to avoid impunity in Belarus, because everybody has to be brought to accountability for their crimes. And Denmark actually is very welcoming country also. They're supporting us politically. They're assistant to our media, human rights defending centers, to our cultural events. So we are grateful to, of course, to both of these countries. And how do I combine being mother and the politician? It's very difficult. I spent many years being every day with my children. And now when everything has started, I was a little bit shocked in, how it is. Where is my children? I had to send my children to Lithuania, and I was always stressed. Because I didn't feel my kids beside me. But now, actually speaking, I really want my children to have their childhood. I want them to be happy, though I understand they realize where their daddy is, that we can't come back home, that my younger daughter, she's 7, she's every evening asking me, "Mom, at last, when I will see my daddy?" And it's so painful, but my obligation as a wife at the moment, to provide a presence of their daddy in their everyday life. We are watching his YouTube blog, where my daughter can hear his voice, because children, they can forget images and voices very fast. Pictures of my husband is everywhere. They're writing letters to him, so they know the situation. And actually, I will open you a small secret, but my children are happy when I am not at home, because when I'm coming back from any official visit, so let's check your home tasks. Okay, let's read, let's do something, let's let's write something, So I turn on my mother job at that moment, and they, "Oh, Mom, when are you going to go somewhere else?" Yeah, I'm trying to control this, but it's difficult. But I believe that my children one day will forgive me, and because they will understand that I sacrificed time with them for higher purposes, and they will value this, and they see this, and it will bring up in them correct values, that they see on the personal example of their parents. Thanks.
Sviatlana, this was a small token of the appreciation for what you're doing. We will have on Monday the Prime Minister of Lithuania, Ingrida Šimonytė, with us. It's very interesting for you to see how does it look from the other side of the border, and to have an opportunity to ask the Prime Minister for all the efforts that the country is doing to support Belarus, to support Ukraine, and to support, at the end of the day, freedom and democracy. Thank you. You've inspired us. We hope we've given you a little bit of energy to keep on fighting. Your fight is the fight of all of us. Thank you, Sviatlana.